All right, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. We're learning Maseches Yevamos Daf Yud Zayin, and as well Daf Yud Ches Amud Aleph. We'll be going until the bottom of the page on Yud Ches. On Shabbos, we'll do the balance through Yud Tes. What is my travel schedule? Travel schedule next week. Shabbos is regular. I had initially said it wasn't. Shabbos is regular. Sunday's regular. Monday's regular. Tuesday, I don't know. I have a flight coming back on Tuesday, in and out same day. If I'm back on time, great. If not, I'll pre-record and post. Wednesday night, we're going to probably be learning in the morning and not at night because I will definitely be out of town Wednesday night, and everything else should be normal. That's not true. And then Thursday, we're going to be posting. So next week's going to be a little choppy.
You know how you make up those charts?
I know. I need a Yevamos chart. A Yevamos chart for my schedule for next week. It's very complicated. I'll keep you all posted. You guys are giving me a very hard time. I shouldn't have shared so much. Third of the way down, Mark, don't talk. Put food in your mouth. Let's go. It's hashgacha pratis. A third of the way down, Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, the Gemara says, Yasiv Rav Yosef, Achore de Rav Kahana. Rav Yosef was sitting behind Rav Kahana. Yasiv Rav Kahana kamed Rav Yehuda, and Rav Kahana was sitting in front of Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda was the Rabbi. Yasiv the Kamer. What was Rav Yehuda teaching? He said the following: Asidin Yisrael da'avde Yom Tova ki charva Tarmud. The Jews are going to have a yontif when Tarmud is destroyed. We had been learning about Tarmud. The Tarmud was a place where there was a lot of yichus shilas and mamzerus shilas, really not simple, and therefore he said it's going to be so much better when that city no longer has any Jews in it, because then we don't have to worry about all the yichus shilas. Says the Gemara, v'hacharif. Hold on one second. It was already destroyed. Says the Gemara. Answer number one: Hahu Tamud Havoy. The city that was destroyed was Tamud, not Tarmud. Rav Ashi argues and says, Amar Hainu Tarmud, Hainu Tamud. Both of them, two cities with the same name. It's like Chicago and the Windy City. They're synonymous. It doesn't matter. The problem is that there's two parts of the community. It's Ichpule Hu de Mechpal. There's two parts of the community. Charb Mehai Gisa Ose Mehai Gisa. If the city got attacked from one side, the other side was able to stay established. The Charb Mehai Gisa Ose Mehai Gisa. And if it got attacked from the other side, then the other side would be able to stand strong. And therefore the city had yet to be destroyed. That's why Rabbi Yehuda said that in the future, when it gets destroyed, it'll be a Yom Tova. Halfway down on Yud Zayin, the Gemara says, Yasiv Rav Hamnuna Kame de Ula. Rav Hamnuna and Ula were talking and learning. The Have Bishmaisa. Rashi says that Rav Hamnuna was asking some brilliant questions, and that led to a compliment from Ula to Rav Hamnuna. Amar ma gavra, uma gavra. What a man and what a man. In other words, he is just amazing. He's doing amazing. That's what Rashi says. Kamahu gadol, such a tremendous person. Ilav, except for one thing, de Harpanya mate, except that he lives in the city of Harpanya. If you take a look in Rashi, 2/3 of the way down, Rashi says about Harpanya, he says, where did the Rashi go? Rashi of Harpanya says, Dibur Hamaschel ilav de Harpanya mate. Rashi says, She'ena miyuchasim. It wasn't a good city because there were a lot of yichus shilas like there was in Tarmud. So that's what he says. He's a great guy, but he came from a bad town. So then Ichsef, he was a little embarrassed to have heard that that's how he was referred to. And the Rebbe kind of thought that maybe he misspoke a little bit. So Amar Le, Kesev Gulgolta, Lehecha Yevamos. Where do you pay your head tax to? It's like literally what's your zip code, right? Whatever the equivalent is. I don't pay to the city that you just said, to the city of Harpanya, but rather I pay to the city of Lefum Nara. So the Rebbe said back to him, you're not from the city of the Miyuchasim. I'm sorry, I apologize. I didn't mean to say anything negative. My Harpanya, what is the city of Harpanya? Says the Gemara, Amar Abzera, Harsha Kol Ponin Bo. It's a mountain that everybody turns to. What does that mean? Rashi, 2/3 of the way down. Dibra Maschal Shah Kol Ponin Sham, Kol Psulim She'ein Motzin Isha, Ponin anyone who had a psul in their yichus, they'd go to Harpanya. Harpanya was the place of everyone with bad yichus. That's where everybody went to live. All the mamzerim lived there. Everybody, all the shtukis lived there. Everybody who had problems with their yichus, they'd go over there and they'd be able to find those who have equivalent problems. B'mas Nisatana, however, there's a Mishnah that speaks about this and says, Kol anyone who doesn't know their family lineage, anyone who doesn't know what shevet they're a part of, they would go to Harpanya. Amar Rava, it's actually worse than Gehenim itself. Shene'emar, when it comes to Gehenim itself, the pasuk says Miyad Shaol Efdeim Mimaves Egalem. That when it comes to Shaol, you can be redeemed. When it comes to death, you can be redeemed. The Ilu Psul Didhu, but the Psul that existed in Harpanya, Leis Lahu Takanta. You can't fix the yichus problems. They're unchangeable. It's worse than Gehenim. Upsule de Harpanya. Mishum Psule de Mishon. Psule de Harpanya was the result of a preceding city, which was Mishon. Psule de Mishon, Mishum Psule de Tarmod. Psule de Tarmod, Mushum Avdei Shlomo. Ainu de Amre Inshe, Kava Rabba v'Kava Zuta. If you have a small measure, a large measure, or a small measure, in other words, if you have a little bit of a problem with your family lineage or a large problem with your family lineage, Min Gedar v'Azil Shol, it always leads to terrible problems, to Gehenna. Umishol Tarmod, Shol will lead you to Tarmod, Umitarmod, Mishan, Umishan Harpanya. In other words, these communities were communities that were struggling with their yichus, and they were not good places to be. That's why, as we started today, it would be good for those cities to be destroyed as it relates to the issues of yichus that would come about from them. Hadran Allah Chameshes Nashim Yiratzon. We should come back to this daf in 7.5 years. Mazel Tov on finishing the first perek of one of the hardest Masechtas in Shas. How many prakim is in this Masechta? What do we have here? 13?
4 months worth.
16. 4 months worth. That's how many prakim we have. Says the Gemara as the new parak opens back into Maseches Yevamos, but it's not terribly difficult. Says the Gemara, Ketzad Eishes Achiv Shelo Haya Be'olamo. We spoke about a case scenario where there are a couple of brothers, and there's a case of Yibum that takes place, but the third brother wasn't even born when the oldest brother died to generate the case of Yibum. So how does this case play out? Says the Gemara, it plays out as follows. 8 lines or so from the bottom, second line of the new Mishnah, new parak. Yud Zayin Abad Aleph. Shnei Achen, there are 2 brothers, Ruvain and Shimon. Umeis Echad, Mehen Ruvain dies, and then V'nolad Lahen Ach, and then Levi, the third brother, is born. Ve'achar Kach Yibim Hasheni Es Eshes Achiv Umeis. Then Shimon marries Ruvain's wife in Yibum because Ruvain died, and then Shimon was about to marry her, and he died. And what happens in that case? Then there's Levi as the third brother, but Levi wasn't alive for the initial cases of Yibum. He wasn't alive when Ruvain died. So you have Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi. Ruvain died. And Ruvain's, we're going to keep the letters the same. Ruvain's wife was with a resh, she's Rachel. Shimon's wife was Shoshana. Okay, so Ruvain died, and then his wife Rachel, same letter, was supposed to be in Yibum to Shimon. And then what happened was Shimon died, and then Levi was born. So now what happens here to all of the wives who have fallen to Levi? Rachel, Ruvain's wife, should fall to Levi. And Shimon's wife Shoshana should also fall to Levi because both Reuven and Shimon died, and Reuven and Shimon didn't have kids. So these 2 wives of Rachel and Shoshana should fall to Levi, the third born. The problem is that he wasn't alive for the first wife's divorce, the first wife's death. When Rachel's husband died, when Reuven died, he wasn't alive. So says the Gemara, Harishona, the Mishnah writes, Harishona, the first wife, referring to Rachel, Yotza Mishum Eshes Achiv Shelo Haya Be'olamo. There's no Yibum in that case. If Ruvain's married to Rachel and Ruvain dies, generating her as a Yevama, and only then is Levi born, that's not Yibum. That's Eshes Achiv Shelo Ba'olam. He wasn't born. There is no matir of Yibum to allow him to marry Rachel. Done. It's completely usher for them to get married. Therefore, Harishona Yotza Mishum Eshes Achiv Shelo Haya, they can't get married. Ve'ashniya, Shoshana, the wife of Shimon, he can't marry her because she's the tzara of the Eshes Achiv Shelo Haya Be'olamo. So therefore, in such a case, there would be no marriages to Levi whatsoever from the 2 brothers' previous wives if Reuven and Shimon died. Asaba Maimer Umeis. What if there wasn't a full marriage? We spoke about this. Maimer is kind of like a quasi-marriage. And what if that took place? So then, Shniya Choletzes V'lo Misyabemes. In that case, the second wife, Shoshana, in our case, would do Chalitza. We'll get back to that later. The Gemara opens that there are different Gersos in our Mishnah. On the 4th line of our Mishnah, it says Harishona. And we said it was referring to Rachel, the first wife. It was the wife of Ruvain, who was the oldest brother who died first. Says the Gemara, Amar of Nachman, Mandatani Rishona lo Mishtabesh. According to the one who says that the language of our Mishnah is Rishona, he did not make an error. It could be Rishona. And Mandatani Shniya lo Mishtabesh. And according to some who says that the word was Shniya, both referring to Rachel, the first Ruvain's wife. In that case, if you have the word Shniya, that's also considered acceptable. Now, as we turn the page, Mandatani Rishona, according to those who say that the language of the Mishnah was Rishona, that's lo mishtabesh, that's not a problem. Why not? Because my Rishona, what does the Mishnah mean when it says Rishona? Rishona lenefila. Of all of the brothers, Ruvain's wife Rachel was the first one to fall to Yibum. She fell to Shimon in Yibum. And Uman de Tani Shniya lo mishtabesh, according to the one who says that she was referred to as the second one, my Shniya lenisuin. She was the second one in regards to marriage, says Rashi on the second line, Shniya lenisuin shel sheni. She was the second one, the second wife of Shimon, who was the second brother. Says the Gemara, that's not necessarily true. Maybe she wasn't the second wife to Shimon. Maybe Shimon did Yibum to Rachel first, and only afterwards did Shimon marry Shoshana. Ella, you're right. Ella, my Shnia. What then could be the reference of Shnia? Says the Gemara, Shnia bin Isuin is her second marriage, because Rachel was married to Ruvain and Ruvain died. And then she married Shimon in Yibum, and that is her second husband. So either way, had our Mishnah said Rishona or Shnia, they are both references to Rachel in regards to her status of marriage. Says the Gemara 5 lines down, what are the Mari Makomos about Esha Zachiv Shalohaya Be'olamo Heicha Ksiba? How do we know, halachically speaking, that the fact that Levi was born after his oldest brother died and left that wife as a Yevama, left Rachel as a Yevama, how do we know that that is something where there's an Isser of the sister-in-law of Eshes Achiv and that there is no Yibum? How do we know that that brother who was born after the fact cannot do Yibum to Rachel? Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Rav, Amar Kara. The pasuk reads, Ki yeshu achim yachdav, when brothers sit together. Shahais alehem yeshiva achas ba'olam. They have to be in the world at the same time when the Yibum is generated. So Ruvain's the oldest brother, he's married to Rachel. When Ruvain dies without children and Levi is not born yet, the mechanics of Yibum don't work. You need the other brother to be in place. So therefore, it doesn't work. So therefore, he is not allowed to marry. You cannot say that there's a din of Yibum when Levi wasn't even alive yet. Doesn't make sense. Yachtav. What does the pasuk mean when it says Yachtav? Miyuchadim benachala. Yachtav, a play on words from the word miyuchad, even though the shorish is not exactly the same. Says the Gemara, maybe it is the same shorish, but the words don't mean the same things. It's miyuchadim benachala, specific to those who merit inheritance. What side of the family does inheritance generate from? The father side of the family, and therefore prat la'achiv min ha'im. The Gemara says that it doesn't work out if it's la'achiv min ha'im, the brothers have to be brothers from the father's side to be in this scenario of Yibum. Rabba Omar Achin min ha'av yolif ach va'ach mibnei Yaakov. He argues on the Mari Makomos. He says it's not from the word Yachtav. We learn the fact that we are only talking about brothers from the father's side to generate Yibum in a case scenario that it's brothers because of achva from bnei Yaakov. Malahalan min ha'av v'lo min ha'im. Just like by the 12 Shvatim, they didn't all have the same mother. There were 4 imahos. Or in this particular, there were 4 mothers who bore children to Yaakov, and all of them had the same father. So Afkan here by Yibum too, mina avelo mina aim. Asks the Gemara, maybe we can learn this from somewhere else. The Leilaf, maybe we can learn that it's only from the father's side. The Leilaf achva mea rayos. Maybe we should learn this Mari Makom from another source. And what would be unique about that other source? Rashi tells us. Rashi is about 12 lines down. Dibra hamaschal me'arayos ervas eshes achicha the kaimalan lekaman beperak habal yevimto de'afilu achicha min ha'em v'lo min ha'av. Even if you have an arayos relationship through the mother's side of the family, it's still going to be usher. So maybe we should assume that Yibum applies if the brothers are from even the mother's side of the family. That's not correct. Says the Gemara, we do not learn from the Gzeira Shava of Achim and Achicha from the world of Arayos. Why not? Because done in Achim, it's better to learn the Gzeira Shava of Achim from the world of Yaakov, and his sons, than to learn Ve'ein done in Achim Me'achicha, that by Arayos, where the words are not exactly the same, it's better to learn from the world of a Gzeira Shava where the words are the same. So it says Achim and Achim by Yaakov, so that's a better place to learn from. Says the Gemara, who cares if the words are slightly different? Ma'naf kamina. We know a famous Gzeira Shava, Hatana de Rabbi Shmuel, the Shava Kohen Uva Kohen, Zohi Shiva, Zohi Bia. We've learned this before in a couple of different contexts over the years. That we have a Gzeira Shava where the words are even different. So what, you're worried about the conjugation of the word Achim to Achicha? They're so close, leave it be. Maybe we should be able to learn from Arayos, and we'll have a more expansive application of Yibum, that it's not only for when the brothers are from the father's side, but even if they're from the mother's side. Says the Gemara, no. Hani Mili, when do we say that you're allowed to have a Gzeira Shava where the words aren't the same? That's Heicha Deleka Midi de Damila. That's only true when there isn't a better Gzeira Shava to use where the words are very similar. Aval Heicha Deika Midi de Damila, Midi Damila Yalfina. But where we have words that are closer to the same, it's better to use those. Therefore, because we have the opportunity to learn from the psukim by Yaakov that say Achicha, that say Achicha and Achicha, that say Achim and Achim. So yeah, Achim and Achim, because by Yaakov that's what it says. Those two words are exactly the same, and therefore that's better than the drasha by Arayos, which is Achim and Achicha. Says the Gemara, oh, but I have another Gzeira Shava for you. and the words are the same. V'lema achva achva bilot. V'chsiv ki anoshim achim anachnu, where they say about Avram and Lot that they are brothers. And says the Gemara, mistabra, it's more logical to say mibnei Yaakov havalei lemelach mishum demufni. It's better to say that from the psukim by Yaakov because the words achim are extra by the psukim in regards to Yaakov. How do we know that? Because the pasuk could have said something else. When they were groveling before Yosef, they could have said that they were avodecha, but they didn't. They said achim anachnu, that were brothers. So therefore, and therefore we know this idea of le'afnuye, that when there is a word that really is fully available for gzeira shava, so then it's much harder to reject that gzeira shava. And here this is a stronger gzeira shava because the word achim by Yosef, by the brothers, is le'afnuye. It's extra. Says the Gemara halfway down on Yud Zayin and Yud Beis. The pasuk needed both words. It needed the pasuk of achim because the pasuk said ki yeshu achim yachtav. We needed both words of achim and yachtav. Why did we need both of those words? Says the Gemara as follows: Dikas of Rachmana achim. If the Gemara had only written the pasuk of achim but not the word yachtav, havamina leilaf achva achva milot, then I might have thought that we make a gzeira shava in regards to which side of the family Yibum can happen on. I might have thought we would have learned from Lot, and Lot and Avraham were not brothers. They weren't brothers at all. So maybe we would have assumed a more expansive definition of when Yibum applies. And if you want to say that maybe that word of achim by Lot is not available, lie. That's incorrect. It is very available. What Lot should have said was rain, but he didn't. He said achim. So the word is perfectly available. And therefore, we might have made an error in assuming where Yibum applies. We might have thought that it wasn't only on the father's side of the family, and we would have thought that it's even on the mother's side of the family. Therefore, so we understand, according to the first half of the tzricha, that we need the word achim and we need the word yachtav. Now let's flip and try to understand what would have happened the other way. Because of Rachmana Yachtav, a little bit more than halfway down Yud Zayin base, if we would have only had the word yachtav, which teaches us that it is on the men's side of the family, havamina midimiyachade be'aba uve'ima tzricha, then I might have thought something different. I might have thought that Yibum only applies when there's both, when the sons are the sons of both the mother and the father. Says the Gemara, why would you ever assume that that's the case? You have fathers who give nachala. Why would you assume that by Yibum things are different? Says the Gemara, because let's finish the question. Because Yibum ben nachala talya milsa. We know that nachala is always going to be dependent on Yibum. So why would you have ever thought? What was the havamina to assume that maybe it's possible that Yibum would only be with both parents? Where if the sons were children fully brothers on both sides, mother's and father's side, says the Gemara Itzrich, because there is something unique about Yibum. Because there's a huge chiddush by Yibum, which really is that she was a sister-in-law to you, and now you're marrying her. The Torah gave a matir that you should be meyabim. So because there's a chiddush here, we might have thought that Yibum, which is a chiddush, is only true in a more limited case, which is when brothers have both common parents. So you have Rachel and Yaakov, and they have 5 sons. Okay, then in that case you have Yibum with those 5 sons. But when 2 of the sons are from one family and one's from them, there's no Yibum anymore. Why? Because it's a heter to start with. It should be usher to marry her with the basic. Then it should be usher. She's a sister-in-law. The Torah was matir. Maybe the Torah was only matir when both parents are when all the boys have common parents. That was a havamina. Therefore, tzricha, we need all of the words. Givaldik. So what did we learn so far? We learned in this new perek that the Mari Makomos that teach us about Eishes Achiv Shelo Bala Olam, that if Ruvain, Shimon, and Levi, there are 3 brothers, Ruvain and Shimon are alive already. Levi has not been born. Ruvain marries Rachel, and then Ruvain dies without children. Yibum is generated for Shimon, and then Levi is born. So Levi is not shaykh to Rachel. Levi cannot marry Ruvain's wife. Why not? Because it's Eishes Achiv Shelo Bala Olam. That's what we've learned so far. We're now going to get into a sugya of Zika. We're 2/3 of the way down, and we're starting with the words Amar Rav Huna. And this sugya is a little bit different than the Zika that we're used to. The Zika that we're used to is that when, let's go back to our Ruvain and Rachel scenario. If Ruvain's married to Rachel, and Ruvain has a brother Shimon, and Ruvain dies, and Rachel doesn't have children, so then we have this reference called a Zika Sibum. A Zika Sibum effectively is some halachic tethering between Rachel, who is now a widow, and Shimon, who is the Yavam. And if they don't get married, they have to do chalitza. Something has to happen. If they don't get married, there has to be Yibum or chalitza. Has to be something. But here, the Zika that we're speaking about here is that according to some, Zika is actually a little bit more powerful. And Zika could be that it's actually kind of like an Erusin. It's kind of like getting engaged halachically, like Harat Mekudeshesli type of engaged, not the social engagements that we do, but the halachic ones. And that's a big machlokas in the Amoraim. Let's learn both sides of this, ask a few questions, and we'll wrap up at the bottom of the page on Yud Ches Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara as follows. Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. So this is very early Amoraim. Rav is a very early Amora. Shomeres Yavam Shemesa. If there's a woman who is waiting to be married, she is a Yavama. She's ready to get married. So Reuven was married to Rachel. Reuven died. So then Rachel is what's referred to as a Shomeres Yavam. And if she dies, then what can a Yavam do? Mutter be'ima. So let's paint the picture. You have a case scenario where Reuven is married to Rachel. Reuven has a brother named Shimon. Reuven dies, leaving Rachel a Yevama to Shimon. Now, if Rachel dies at this point, can Shimon marry Rachel's mother?
Oh, Rachel's mother.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's the Gemara's question here in regards to Rachel's mother. So the Zika, if there is a very strong Zika, if we assume that they're halachically engaged, so then that should be a rayos. It should be a mother-in-law of sorts, and it should be forbidden. So therefore, says the Gemara, Alma, Kasavar Ein Zika. It must be that Rav is of the opinion that there is no Zika to the level where we presume that there's a level of engagement in regards to the Yavama and the Yavam between Rachel and Shimon. Because had that been the case that there was a Zika, then of course he would not be able to marry the mother of Rachel. That would be his mother-in-law. Says the Gemara, it's a very strange formulation. Why did you say Shomeres Yavam Shemesa Mutter Be'ima? You should have said Velema Halacha Kedivre Homer Ein Zika. Just say that there's no Zika between a Yavama and a Yavam. Says the Gemara, we can't say that. 3/4 of the way down. Ihava Amar Hachi, had all I said is that the din is like Ein Zika, that there is no halachic tethering between the two to the point that they're basically engaged. If I would have only said Ein Zika, then Havamina Hani Mili betray. I would have thought that maybe there's only no Zika when there are two brothers, because then we don't know where the Zika lies, because there's two brothers and one woman. The Zika is kind of amorphous. We know that she can marry, she's a Yavama to either of them, but it's not a specific line to any one person. Aval, I might have inferred B'chad Yesh Zika. I might have inferred that maybe according to Rav, that had there only been one brother, the Taka, there might be Zika. So therefore, we had to say the more circuitous language that Rav said, which was Shomeres Yavam Shemesa Muter Be'ima. Says the Gemara, still, just say what you want to say. Just say that there's no Zika, even if there's only one brother, there's no Zika. Why do you have to say, just say the Shita, say what you want to say. So it says the Gemara, Yamar Hachi, if that's all he said, then Havamina Afilu Mechaim. I might have thought that if you say Ein Zika, that even when she's alive, there's no Zika. And that means that even when she's alive, that Shimon can marry Rachel's mother. And that's not true. Kamash Malon, la'achar misayin. The only time we say that there's no Zika is after she dies. But when Rachel is still alive, then Shimon cannot marry Rachel's mother. Mishum de'asher levatal mitzvahs yavam. The reason why is not because there's Zika, because Rav holds there is no Zika, but Rav says that in a case where she's still alive, we need to ensure that we don't lose the world of Torah's Yevamos. We had to keep these halachos alive, and therefore Yibum does have to take place, though technically speaking, it would. You're right, there is no Zika. So that's the Shita of Rav. Let's ask a question on this. Tanan, the Mishnah writes, Yevimto Shemesa Mutter Be'achosa. Wow. So it says that if Rachel dies and Rachel has a sister named Leah, so then it should be mutter for Shimon to marry Leah because there's no Zika. So it says the Gemara, let's make a diuk here. Be'achosain, be'ima lo. The Gemara says maybe the Mishnah here is distinguishing and saying that you can only marry a sister, but you cannot marry a mother. Says the Gemara, that's not correct. You're making the wrong diuk in the Mishnah. Hu hadin da'afilu be'ima. Really, it should be the case that he's allowed to marry the mother as well in this case, because we hold that there's no Zika according to Rav. But the only reason it says the word achosa is because v'aydi d'tana reisha ishto shemesa muter be'achosa. Since in the reisha it used the word ishto and be'achosa in aval be'ima lo tahavi l'isur d'oraisa. So therefore tani seifa muter be'achosa. So the word achosa here is not specific, and all of this is the shita of Rav who holds ein Zika. That's Shita number 1. And here is Shita number 2. Rabbi Yehuda, 5 lines from the bottom. Rabbi Yehuda Amar, Shomeres Yavam Shemesa Aser Be'ima. That's a big difference. Rav and Rabbi Yehuda, they're arguing. It's interesting because Rabbi Yehuda was a Talmud of Rav. It's very interesting in the history of how things are being done. But if you look back up a little bit higher, when Rav was quoted, it said that it was Rabbi Huda in the name of Rav Huna in the name of Rav, and this is Rabbi Huda. So Rav Huna and Rabbi Huda were the same generation, so it could just be that the machlokas was there, and Rabbi Huda is not quoting Rav. Maybe he's really quoting Shmuel because he also used to learn by Shmuel. So that's not clear from here. Anyways, what's Rav Shita? Rav holds Yesh Zika Shomeres Yavam Shemesa Aser Be'ima, that if Rachel became a Yevama and she dies before Yibum takes place, so what does Rabbi Huda say? He says Aser Be'ima. There is an Isser, there is a Zika status between Shimon and Rachel when Rachel was alive immediately after Ruvain died. And therefore, automatically, the mother becomes Asura through this bond of Zika between Shimon and Rachel. And then even if Rachel dies, Shimon cannot marry Rachel's mother, Alma, because Savar Yesh Zika. By virtue of the fact that we see that the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda doesn't allow for Shimon to marry Rachel's mother, that therefore shows us the Yesh Zika, that he holds that there is a bonding of some kind, this halachic tethering between Shimon and Rachel for the moments that she was alive after Ruvain died and before she died, and therefore Rachel's mother is off limits to Shimon. We're a couple lines from the bottom of the page on Yud Zayin Amid Beis. So says the Gemara, that's his Shita. Asks the Gemara, Belema halacha kedibri Homer Yesh Zika. Same line of questioning we asked before. Rabbi Yehuda, if you're of the opinion of Yesh Zika, then just say Yesh Zika. Says the Gemara, no, you can't do that. Had it been that all I said that the halacha is that Yesh Zika, I might have thought that the only time that there's Zika is when there's only one brother, so that I know there's a direct line. There's Shimon. That's it. There's only one brother. So there's Ruvain and Shimon, and Ruvain died without children. Rachel can marry Shimon. That's crystal clear. But I might have thought, Aval Betray, Ein Zika. I might have thought that when it comes to two brothers, that there is no Zika. Says the Gemara, that is a ridiculous Havamina because of the following. You cannot say that, says the Gemara. V'haki pligi, betray pligi. This is Rashi tells us what's going on here in the bottom line. Dibra maskal v'haki pligi. Rabbi Yehuda beravanan betray who did pligi. Kedekatani hamtena chiasechi chamaisa. Okay, that's a sugya for later. That's on Daf Mem Aleph. But what Rashi is pointing out over here is that there's no way you could have had a havamina that we're talking about a misunderstanding of when there are two brothers who are potentially yavamim, because that case is already a machlokes elsewhere. So the Gemara says you're right. So what was the question that we were trying to answer? We said, why don't you just say Yesh Zika? Why did you say Shomeres Yavam Shemesa Asura Be'ima? So answers the Gemara, Eli Amar Hachi. If you would have said that just straight up, that we hold of Ein Zika, top of Yud Ches Amud Aleph, Havamina Mechaim. I might have thought that it was true even when they were alive. Abala'achar Misa Pakala Zika. I might have thought that there's only a Zikas Yavam when the person's alive. Abala'achar Misa Pakala Zika. I might have thought that if the person dies, that when Rachel dies, that all of the status of Zika goes away. Kamash Malan de Zika bichdi lo paka. That the status of Zika does not go away. That's what the Gemara says. Now the Gemara, we use the following brisa to ask a question on Rav. Therefore, we're using it as a support to the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. So Lema Misayele, third line of Yud Ches Amud Aleph, Yevimto Shemesa Mutter Be'achosa in Be'amalo. Put this in the wrong place. Be'achosa in Ube'amalo. So it says the Gemara, maybe this is a raya to the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda because it says that be'ima lo, it's not allowed. Answers the Gemara, no, not correct. The same answer as before. Really, technically speaking, the halachic status applies to both of them. So the Gemara says that for the sake of symmetry, that brisa used the word achosa, but it was not meant to make a diuk about an ima, and therefore this is not a support for the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. A couple of questions. The Gemara says 7-8 lines down, Masi Rav Huna bar Chia. Asaba Maimer Umeis. What if there was a case of Maimer that took place? This is a quote from our Mishnah. So then we said in our Mishnah, at the end of our Mishnah that we started with at the new parak on the bottom of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, we had said Shnia Choleses v'lo misya bemes. Taima, what's the reason why she does chalitza? Because the avad b'Maimer, because Shimon married Rachel with this quasi marriage with Kiddushay Yevama. Halo avad b'Maimer, Shnia nami yivum emiyabma. And it seems to be that had he not done Maimer, that Yibum would have been an appropriate measure for this woman and not chalitza for Rachel. Says the Gemara, and if Rabbi Yehuda, you're correct that there's Zika, it shouldn't work. You shouldn't be able to do Yibum in such a case because she is Eishes Achiv to Levi. And if she's Eishes Achiv to Levi, then that doesn't work out. Then they should not be able to get married. The Zika, it can't be that there's Zika. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabba, who adid the afal gav de lo avad b'maimer shniya mechaletz chalutze yevume lo miyabma. The din does not change. The diuk you made is wrong. You wanted to say that had there not been maimer that they could have done yibum. It's not true. That afal gav de lo avad b'maimer, even without maimer, they still shniya, the second wife, would have been michlatz chaltza yevume lo miyabma. It still would have only been chalitza. The only reason why that Marimako mentioned maimer was la'afuke mi Beis Shammai, was to exclude a shita of Beis Shammai so that we don't misunderstand and think Beis Shammai was right. What did Beis Shammai say? To Amre, they said maimer kona kinyan gomor kamash malon. Then Beis Shammai was of the opinion that maimer is a full-fledged kinyan of marriage. Kamash malon. We don't paskin like Beis Shammai. That's all the Gemara was saying, but not meant for the diukim that you just attempted. Let's ask another question. Says the Gemara, third of the way down. Yud Ches Amud Aleph. Esvei Abaye. Abaye asks a question from the following Tosefta. What does the Tosefta say? Shnei achim be'olam echad. Two brothers are in one world. In other words, both brothers are alive. Reuven and Shimon are alive. Umeis echad mehen belo vlad. And Reuven dies without children. Shimon is still alive. V'amar hasheni hazeh la'asos maimer b'yavimto. And Shimon wants to do maimer to Rachel's wife, to Rachel, who was Reuven's wife. V'lo hispik la'asos bo maimer ad shenolad lo ach umeis. And then, right when he was about to do maimer to Rachel, Shimon died and Levi was born. Was that the order? No, ad shenolad lo ach umeis. Yeah. So then that's what happened. So then what's the halacha with Rachel and what's the halacha with Shoshana, right? Reuven is married to Rachel. Shimon is married to Shoshana. Reuven is married to Rachel. Reuven died. Shimon was about to do maimer to Rachel, and then Shimon died, but Levi was born. So then the Gemara says, Harishona Rachel. What about the wife of Reuven? She's yotza mishum esha sachiv shelo haya be'olamo. She cannot be married by Levi because she's esha sachiv shelo haya be'olamo, because there is no heter of yibum for Levi because Levi was not alive when Reuven died. So says the Gemara, Vishnia, what about the wife of Shimon, the second brother? So his wife Shimon, Shoshana, what about her? She does either chalitza or yibum. So says the Gemara, it must be that Rabbi Yehuda is wrong. Rabbi Yehuda said that there's yesh zika, but v'iyamris yesh zika. If you say that there is zika, that makes no sense. The zika shouldn't help because in this brisa, it shouldn't work at all because at the end of the day, it's one of the people is arayos because Levi is not allowed to marry Reuven's wife Rachel because she is esha sachiv shelo haya be'olamo. Says the Gemara. That particular brisa is not a good question against Rabbi Yehuda because money. That's a shita b'das yachid in the Tanaim. That's Rav Meir Hida Amar Ein Zika. But in general, most Tanaim don't hold like that. Asks the Gemara, does Rav Meir really hold Ein Zika? Umi svira leila Rabbi Ein Zika v'hatnan. Arba achim. Let's say that there are four brothers. Shnai mehem nesuin shtei achayos. Two of the brothers, Reuven and Shimon, married Rachel and Shoshana, who were sisters. Umesu hanesuin ha'achayos. And the husbands, Reuven and Shimon, who were married to Rachel and Shoshana, they died. These two women of Rachel and Shoshana should do chalitza and not yibum. If really Rav Meir was of the opinion of Ein Zika, so then Hani Mitrei Bate Ka'asyan, Haili Yabem Chada. If there still are two brothers, what's the big deal? Why do they have to do chalitza? If you don't hold of Zika, so they can marry anyone they want. They can marry either of the remaining brothers of Levi and Yehuda, whoever they are. Says the Gemara, that would then imply that he holds that there's yesh zika. The fact that he's saying that he has some connection to the brothers to the point that they have to do chalitza or yibum, it means that there's a zika. Says the Gemara, no, it's not correct. La'olam ein zika. Really, Rav Meir is of the opinion that there is no halachic tethering between Rachel and Shoshana and the two brothers of Reuven and Shimon who are still alive. Let's call them Levi and Yehuda. La'olam ein zika. There's really no zika. We're only doing this for show. We're doing this to make sure that we don't forget the halachos of yibum. The dilma, what might happen in such a case if we don't do yibum with these women or chalitza? What should we do? The dilma adam yavim chad ma'is idach. That maybe while Rachel is marrying Levi, then all of a sudden the other brother dies, Yehuda dies, and then the other wife can't get married, then Shoshana can't get married. So says the Gemara, v'kabadlas mitzvahs yivamin. The ein zika, if there is no zika, who cares, says the Gemara, tibatel. Well, if there's no zika, then there should be no yibum. Why are we doing this cockamamie that doesn't even make any sense? If there's no zika, who cares about yibum? Why are you worried about forgetting about yibum when there's no zika? If there's no zika, there's no yibum. Says the Gemara, we should be able to be mavato. The Rabban Gamliel Amar Ein Zika. In a case where there is no Zika, umutter levatzal mitzvah sivamin. Ditnan, what's the Mishnah that shows this? Rabban Gamliel says explicitly, Omer im miana. If this is, we're learning this out of context, but if there is a young girl who wants to do miyun, she can. V'im lo miana, but if she does not, then tamtenat shetagdil. She should wait until she becomes a gedola, until she's 12, and then v'teitze halazu mishumachos isha, and then she'll instantly become a sister-in-law. There's no zika. Why didn't you do yibum? Because you don't need to do yibum when there's no zika. So we see Rabban Gamliel is black on white that you don't need to do the mitzvah of Yibum when there's no Zika. This isn't a game. You don't need to do Zika. So why didn't we say that earlier? Why didn't Rav Meir say that? So says the Gemara, Amar Le, the Rabban Gamliel, the Rabban Meir Karamis. You're asking me one Tana against another? They're allowed to have, they're big boys. They're allowed to have a machlokas between the two of them. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't ask that question. Like, Marlo, you misunderstood the question. That's not what I was asking. Really, here's the question. The question I was asking is as follows. Rav Meir chayesh afilu l'sfeika. Rav Meir was worried even about the smallest little suffix. But Rabbi Gamliel afilu levadai lo chayesh. They were totally opposite ends of the spectrum. Even when there was a vadai zika, Rabbi Gamliel was not concerned. And even when there was the smallest suffix, Rav Meir was concerned. Those are diametrically opposed shitas. How can they be so far apart from one another? Answers the Gemara 4 lines from the bottom, and we'll close with this answer. Dilma manda lo chayish. Maybe a person who's not concerned about this idea, afilu levadai lo chayish. Rabbi Gamliel just doesn't care about it. I'm not concerned. When there's no zika, you don't have to worry about yibum. However, Rabbi Meir manda chayish afilu l'sveika chayish. He is very concerned about it, and because of that, even in a small case, even when there's a suffix, he's going to say that you still need to do yibum in such a case. So sikum advarim, what we've learned is a big machlokes in the Amorai. Is there zika halachic tethering between the Yevama who just became a widow and Shimon, who is the remaining brother? And we saw a big machlokas where Rav holds that there's Ein Zika, and Rav Yehuda holds Yesh Zika, and a couple of questions and answers the Gemara asked about that. We'll stop right here, and we'll pick up in Mir Hashem on Shabbos an hour before Mincha. Wishing you all a beautiful night.